Now you're live.
Sam Darnold is quarterback 4. Zach Charbonnet and Jordan Mason are top 10 running backs. Jawan Jennings was this week's wide receiver 1, and Malik Neighbors is the overall wide receiver 1 in PPR through 3 weeks. Cole freaking Kmet, wide receiver 3 on the season. What's my point here? We just don't know everything, and we weren't right about everything coming into the season. It's time to start leaning on usage through the first 3 weeks and not just those box scores week to week. I hope you're 3-0, but if you're not, or if you are, you're still in the right place. Let's get ready for week 3.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk.
Welcome into another episode of Another Damn Fantasy Podcast presented by Bite Size Sports. On today's episode, we recap week 3, get our quick reactions, talk some party pass, do some patience, and then we'll get you ready for week 4. Our start sits have been okay, but we've also botched a couple, and of course I'll talk about some of those. I think we'll both talk about some of those. But first, welcome in, Josh. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. My week 3 saw me experience the full gamut of fantasy. I had the Anthony Richardson roller coaster in free fall mode. I had Chuba Hubbard on the bench in one league, but I also picked a Brock Purdy, Jawan Jennings DFS stack, and that was nice to say the least. So it was everything that we love about fantasy: the uncertainty, the inconsistency, and the fun. So.
It's why we play the game. Exactly. Yeah, Jawan Jennings was a great play this past week.
Crazy.
If you got him on your lineups, great job. Kudos to you. If you played him at very, very low ownership in DFS, kudos to you. I think I played him on FanDuel, and he was like 6%. So yeah. I think he was a little higher on DraftKings from what I'm hearing, but man, anytime you get a 6% guy like go off like that, you are feeling pretty good. If you're here with us in the chat, throw chat in throughout the week or throughout the show. If you got start sit questions, if you have reactions to week 3, which we'll get into here shortly, throw them in the chat. We'd love to discuss them with you, answer all of those questions throughout the show. But let's get into it. Quick reaction from week 3. Josh, I'll let you start first.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels. We knew the rushing upside was going to be there. I know this is more of a specific player one, but I mean, some of those balls he was dropping into the basket of Terry McLaurin were super encouraging. And watching the Commanders definitely run with the Bengals, but also not have a great defense. I think from a fantasy standpoint, Jaden Daniels is living up to what we were hoping with the rushing upside, and then some with some of that passing. So, that's my big takeaway was his performance. And then of course, Andy Dalton, resurrecting the Carolina Panthers skill position players was exciting. I'm not ready to get fully on board the train there, but it was nice to see, your Deontay Johnsons, your Chuba Hubbards, your legitimate players actually get some stuff. Adam Thielen didn't do a whole lot, but the point is, will they be legit? I don't know, but it was definitely encouraging. So we'll see if Andy Dalton's got anything left.
Yeah. The Red Rifle showed out. And the whole team played pretty well in Carolina.
Yep.
My quick reactions: 0 RB drafters and at least in managed league season longs, they just might be dead at this point. I was just looking at like some of the running backs who were drafted in rounds 7 and 9, because these are usually where, at least for myself, if I'm drafting 0 RB, I'm spending the first 6 picks on wide receivers, maybe get my quarterback and tight end, and then I start hammering running back. So I went back, I looked at who was drafted around 7 to 9. Here's some names. The first couple are decent. Brian Robinson Jr., Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Tony Pollard. They're all within the top 24 running backs, but they're all outside the top 15. So they're not really winning you week to week, but they're at least giving you some points. But then they had Tajay Spears and Chase Brown and Javonte Williams and Nick Chubb and Austin Eckler and Raheem Mostert. And it's just like hurt. All these guys are hurt.
Yep.
Javonte Williams is just trash. Chase Brown, really, he got a little bit more work in week 3, but hasn't really been on the field much. Tajay Spears can't stay healthy and on the field. All these guys that we were excited about these guys having that opportunity this year, and none of them are really doing well for us. And so it kind of just feels like our zero RB teams might be dead. At least that process. So now it's time to obviously make changes, do trades, pick up guys from the waiver wire. So if you drafted those guys, hopefully you picked up Jordan Mason or, one of these guys or Cam Akers maybe for a game or two.
Right.
So yeah, that's my quick reaction right now. I just don't really feel comfortable because that's how I drafted all season long.
Yeah.
Zero RB guys. And so just trying to figure out what to do at that second running back most often.
Right. Yeah, I think hero RB work is always in play for people depending on the guys they like that are high up on the draft board, but zero RB has been super popular and everyone was loading up on receivers and trying to get all that consistency. But yeah, that's pretty eye-opening when you put that in the notes here, the 7th through 9th round guys that people were hammering. I mean, I was high on a lot of those guys myself, and yeah, it's just it's yucky. It's not good in that range anymore.
Not good at all. Lee, welcome in. Thanks for jumping in the chat. We will answer this question when we get to start sits. Anthony Richardson is actually on our list for either a start or a sit this week. So we'll definitely get to that question. Caleb Williams, I don't believe is on there. I'm not really comfortable starting Caleb Williams at all right now. But the Rams, their defense is not great. They're pretty bad. So, and they just gave up 3 touchdowns to Jawan Jennings of all people. So, Rome Odunze kind of looked better this week. Maybe you could get Caleb Williams if you're in a pinch, but I would definitely look elsewhere, and we will talk quarterbacks here in a little while. Let's get into our biggest win of the week coming out of week 3. I'll get us started here. I'm going Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and company. I go into Monday Night Football in a dynasty league where I have Joe Burrow double stacked with Chase and Higgins. I go into another league where I have just Chase, and I need a big night from Chase to get into it, and they smash. And then I go and throw a FanDuel lineup together that is essentially all Bengals and all Bills. Burrow, Moss, Chase, Andre Yoshivas. And then I brought back Terry McLaurin, and then I had James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, and the Bills defense. So I just went 4 Bengals, 4 Bills, brought back Terry McLaurin for all the money, turned my $35 in entry fees into a $500 bink, a 510 person tournament. So that's
nice.
The Bengals, even though they lost,
right?
It was my biggest win of the week.
Yeah, that's awesome. Even though they lost, it doesn't matter as long as they're cooking for fantasy. Right. I don't have
Washington defense is still bad.
Yes, yeah. That's why the other reason I was excited about Jaden Daniels is like the Washington Commanders, even if he's playing well, they're not going to be running the clock out in any game. They're going to be desperate to get more and more points. So that's good. Yeah, your Bengals, those sound like a great DFS lineup. It's weird. It doesn't even sound like it's possible.
Worked out well.
Wild.
Andre Yoshibas, 510 entries. He was 4.7% drafted.
Oof. Yeah.
That was my big, that was what separated me. 13.7 FanDuel points, 5 for 52 and a touchdown. That's what really separated me because on a 2-game slate,
right?
Jamar Chase was 96% or 94% roster.
Right.
You can pretty well get anybody you want on these. And so you have to hit the one guy, and that's getting 5 for 52 and a touchdown doesn't seem like a lot, but in a game like this, that was huge.
Right, for sure. Yeah, that's nice. And actually, Yoshivas, I didn't actually get him on my list, but he's kind of in that consideration for me as a pretty consistent flex starter week in, week out, depending on matchup. Like I didn't quite put him on my start list yet, because I want him to do a little bit longer, but signs are pointing up in the right direction for him. Absolutely.
He kind of
My
has that
biggest
Tyler
win-
Boyd role in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Tyler
And
Boyd
Tyler
had
Boyd-
some games, you know.
Yeah. And he was always just really consistent. So you always knew he was going to get a little bit of a floor. It wasn't going to be league winning or anything like that, but at least you kind of knew what you were going to get from a bare minimum standpoint. So,
yeah.
For my biggest win, I kind of had two picks. So I put To the Mooney and Back as my little tagline there. I almost accidentally put Mooney as my start again this week because I really like what he's got going there with Kirk as kind of the third or fourth option there. Seems to be developing a rapport. I think he's going to be a pretty solid flex contributor, but I didn't pick him for my biggest win. I was happy with the Brock Purdy start out of quarterback because, he threw for just about 300 yards. He had the 3 touchdowns, the no picks. He didn't have Debo, he didn't have Kittle, he didn't have McCaffrey, and still found a way to do pretty well. And again, that's to go back to Lee's question about Caleb Williams against the Rams, that might be a sign that Caleb Williams could put up something. I know he doesn't have the track record yet, but the Rams just might have a really terrible secondary for a while. So, so I like the Brock Purdy pick. He finished as QB5, so it wasn't like he was just barely hanging on as a QB1. He was a legit QB1 this week, so I feel pretty good about that one. Especially with missing some of his weapons. Like, I can't believe they lost, to be honest. I don't know what's wrong with the 49ers right now, but
yeah,
I wanted them to win because
in that fashion too.
Right. I wanted them to win because my Vikings beat them, and I want everyone to know that was a marquee win for us. So I don't want the Rams to get the win the next week. Come on, San Francisco. What are you doing?
I think as long as the Vikings keep winning, everybody's going to stop that.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to. Before we get to our biggest loss of the week, Lee asked in the chat who should have been the 101 this year. First of all, great question.
Yeah.
This gives me, it's also teased it up. Kind of felt like I put him in the chat to ask this question. Right before we got on today, Josh and I were talking about next week's show. We're going to do kind of a redraft, essentially, for 2 rounds, a redraft just to kind of see where we think people are after the first quarter of the year for the rest of the season. So I think it'll be just a fun little exercise to kind of see who would we draft at the 101 right now. Where do guys like Malik Neighbors or Rashee Rice or Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, like where are these guys going to fall now if we were to redraft for the rest of the season? So we will do that next week. It should be a pretty fun exercise. But I'll go ahead and answer the question here. I think obviously right now CMC is out, Tyreek Hill's out. I think it's probably between CeeDee Lamb. I think Saquon has to be in the conversation now. Probably Jamar Chase, especially after next week when he gets the Panthers. I think he'll probably get back into the conversation. But for me, I'm going to stick with CeeDee Lamb. I know that it hasn't been eye-popping, but he is still the most consistent wide receiver. Actually, your boy Justin Jefferson might even be in the conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
Shit, if they would stop blowing teams out to where he doesn't have to catch the ball in the second half,
right?
Like he might be in the conversation. So I think I'm going CeeDee Lamb still. Josh, where would you be if you were taking the 101 right now?
Yeah, I think it's kind of fitting that you chose you kind of were harping on the 0 running back kind of failing you a little bit because I don't think you go wrong with CD, with Chase, with Jefferson. I think those high-end receivers are going to end up producing and they answered some questions, right? Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow appear to be back. CeeDee Lamb is still one of the best threats in the league, and Jefferson has not been super affected by the Sam Darnold change at quarterback. He just hasn't had quite the volume, but that'll come. And so I think you're feeling good with any of those 3. But I mean, when I look at those Saquon Barkley numbers, he's been over 30 points twice in PPR scoring. He's just barely missed 3 straight 100-yard games on the ground. And I did not foresee this at all with Saquon Barkley. Everyone knows the talent's there, but I thought with his injury history and with, just Jalen Hurts a quarterback, I just thought, he's not going to be that epic. Like I felt really nervous about using a late first round pick on him, but now that hero RB is really valuable because even, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, the guys that have been playing that were in that top 10 for running backs, they haven't quite gotten there yet. And Bijan hasn't quite seen the holes that he needs to get going yet. So I still believe in those guys, but I mean, if I'm drafting right now, it'd be really hard for me to pass up that production going forward. So I think for sure the top three receivers and, pretty similar to what at the beginning was. And then, I'd throw Saquon Barkley in that mix. I might even take him just to feel set at running back, but
yeah, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, number 1 and number 2. Alvin obviously has the 5 touchdown game against the Cowboys.
Yeah, he had 40 some fantasy points that game.
Both of those guys have over 20 fantasy points, more than number 3 overall. I don't even remember who number 3 overall was, but when I was looking at doing some research earlier today, that really popped out to me, the fact that they were over 20 points more than the third place guy so far. So
yeah, for running backs,
it's in just 3 games.
That's for running backs, I think it's Devon Achane and Kyron Williams who are 3-4, and they're full 20 points plus less than Barkley and Kamara. So
and I mean Kamara's fine. I wouldn't put him in the conversation just because he had a smash game and now they just had kind of a down game against the Eagles where Barkley didn't have a down game still. So I think that's why he's not in that conversation. So Barkley's really separated himself through the first 3 games. Great question, Lee. Thank you for that. If you're all here, throw those kind of questions in the chat. We love, just rambling on about fantasy football. Hit that like button if you would, and subscribe to the Bite Size Sports YouTube channel as we are on our road to 750 subscribers. Josh, biggest loss of the week. Let's keep it moving here. I'll let you get us started on this one.
Yep. Sad days. And so I'll be expecting any sort of hate that you want to send my way if you actually took my DeAndre Swift advice. That's the biggest L I hope I take all year. That was brutal. I just thought with the volume and going up against the Colts that had been gashed previously, I thought if he's going to have any game, this is going to be the game. But now it looks like there's going to be some more Roshan Johnson in the mix. And, it was a huge bummer because he had like 13. What did I write? He had 13 carries for 20 yards. It's not even that he was had a middling performance that I could try to spin in the right direction. He was awful. And probably a lot of people called it. So I went out on a limb, but I'm taking that L. I'm going to own that one. So send it my way. But that's the biggest loss of the week and hopefully my biggest loss of the season.
That's right. That's right. I had Jerome Ford last week as the start of the week, and it wasn't great. He ends up as a top 30 running back. It didn't feel good, though. You only got your 10 points. But that looks great. That looks great compared to DeAndre Swift. So
yeah, DeAndre Swift was RB 45 this past week. So yeah, very nice.
Well, my biggest loss of the week, I have now done this 2 weeks in a row where I've said you should sit this guy, and then that guy blows up. So good luck figuring out what 4 sits of the week this week is going to blow up this week. There's one of them I hope actually does that I have sit of the week. But last week I said, go ahead and sit Dallas Goedert. Things weren't really working for Dallas Goedert leading into that game. I knew there, AJ Brown had already been out for 2 games and Dallas Goedert still wasn't really involved. They were running the ball really well. And Dallas Goedert goes out for 10, 170 and a touchdown and like a 65-yard guy was wide open. 2 defenders just run into each other. And while it was happening, I was watching and I was like, wow, I just am eating crow right now because this dude is absolutely bawling after I said, you know what, go ahead, stream somebody else. Don't start Dallas Goedert. And he absolutely smashes and ends up as the tight end 1 and really separated at the position this week. So, You win some, you lose some.
Exactly.
And that one was a pretty big loss.
Yep, that's
Big
fair.
loss.
That's fair. It was good for me. I had him in a dynasty league, and I needed him to put up some points. So I'm okay with him going backwards on you there.
Lee sat Swift for Ford. Well, I guess Ford got you a couple more points than Swift did. Either one was great. All right, let's get into the news here. Starting at quarterback, Andy Dalton obviously looked great.
Yeah,
he's going to continue to be the starting quarterback. He was QB8 on the week, so that's good news for your Panthers. We'll talk a little bit more about Andy Dalton in our party or pass segment. Skylar Thompson, QB2 for the Miami Dolphins, now has a rib injury. I don't know.
bad.
What do we do? Devon A-Chain still looks fine.
Right.
But what are we going to do with Hill and Waddle?
Yeah, I think it's tough because with Mostert out, A-Chan has shouldered the large part of the workload, so you cannot sit that volume. Which is a kind of not a bummer, but you're worried now because are they going to be on the field long enough? Are they going to have enough sustained drives, or is it going to be 3 and out all the time or turnovers all the time? But the nice thing with A-Chan is that he at least is also a threat in the passing game out of the backfield. And so, he's going to get volume, even if they can't run the ball very well. But yeah, even the downgrade to Skylar Thompson, when it happened, it was 2 years ago, I think, when Skylar Thompson got some starts, right? When Tua was struggling with the concussion stuff. And it was kind of like Tyreek Hill was fine because he was the wide receiver one. He was still getting fed a little bit, and it was Jalen Waddle that really struggled to get targets. But now it just looks like I don't know if anybody can get either of them the ball consistently, and so it's very nerve-wracking if Tyreek Hill was your first round pick for sure.
Yeah.
You might still have to start him. It'd be hard to sit him over a guy who's borderline flex, but you got to hope that I don't know. I don't. From what I've seen, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Tim Boyle or Tyler Huntley. From what I've seen from the Tyler Huntley Ravens games, though, I would almost prefer to see Tyler Huntley back there because, he's got the scrambling capabilities, extending the plays. He maybe can find Tyreek Hill getting open on a broken play a little bit more than Tim Boyle can. I'm just grasping at straws to try to find some positivity there. I think you're very worried with pretty much all the Miami playmakers, and with Hill and Waddle, I'm having a hard time starting them, even though they're both, they're wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 easily. So who knows?
Yeah. They're going to come up a little later on as well from me. I like Tyler Huntley. As you mentioned, he's looked good for Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Boyle's never looked good. Skylar Thompson's never looked good. And so if they get an opportunity to have Tyler Huntley or could get Tyler Huntley in the game, I think that probably gives them the best chance to win. Just from my little knowledge of those 3 backup quarterbacks, I think he probably gives them the best chance to win for sure. A couple running news for running backs. I threw this one in there because it just popped up like late today. Alvin Kamara missed practice for rib and hip injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was also thinking about it because Sleeper was going off today. Many guys went from healthy to questionable. And it's Wednesday. So that kind of made me think, I wonder if they just all we're 3 weeks in now. They're probably just getting some rest today. So maybe it's not as bad as it could have been. You really don't like people showing up on the injury report on like a Thursday or Friday. Right. They're practicing and then they show up because AJ Brown, right? He got hurt on Friday at practice, pulled his hamstring, and now he's missed 3 games. But so I don't know, I guess keep monitoring that news. I do think one thing that is newsworthy here is Dameon Pierce. Yeah. He could be back this week. Joe Mixon obviously could be back. I don't think he's going to be back this week. But I do think Dameon Pierce coming back for Houston is worth monitoring, especially if you picked up Cam Akers for a couple of spot starts. I think Pierce probably becomes the guy if he's active this week. What do you think?
I think the biggest news there is if Pierce is back and you had picked up Akers off the waiver wire and like, ooh, look at me, I got Akers. That was a savvy move. but I'd be very nervous about starting Akers actually, and Pierce, to be honest too. But I do think Pierce is going to get the workload when he's back. He's got much more rapport with that offense, and he's been there longer. And I think he's, if he hadn't been hurt, I think he would have gotten a nice chunk of carries with Mixon out. So that's another situation to monitor closely. But I'm not touching Cam Akers personally if Dameon Pierce is back, and and they have the Jags this week. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Texans later, or that game a little bit later. But they have the Jags this week, so their offense should get back on track. Like CJ Stroud probably should get back on track. But I don't know what that means for Dameon Pierce. And I definitely don't like what that might mean for Cam Akers if Pierce is back. So,
and then at tight end, Sam Laporta still struggling with this ankle injury that he has. I can't remember. He didn't play this past week, right?
Sam Laporta? No, he did.
He got hurt during that game.
Yeah, he played hurt. He had I want to pull up his numbers right now. He had a few catches. It was still kind of like, when are we going to see the Sam Laporta from last year, if at all? Because he was TE23. He only had 2 catches, so he may not have even finished the game. I'm not sure. I was actually watching parts of the Lions Cardinals game back earlier today, but I didn't get all the way through, so I don't know if he left with an injury or not. But it says he's got a low ankle sprain, so that's a little worrisome.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of that game, Trey McBride leaves that game with a concussion. Not looking good. Probably going to miss this week. So if you have Trey McBride and you see the Q tag, I would be at minimum getting a second tight end on my roster to be prepared to start. And then also I think like guys like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch come into flex-worthy options if you need a dart throw if Trey McBride's out.
Yeah, for sure. There's a little foreshadowing right there, but also Trey McBride. I
didn't read the notes well enough. If that is
I changed them because I wanted to start Mooney again this week, but I was like,
that's right.
I did that last week. So, but anyway, Trey McBride, that's worrisome. Whenever you hear concussion protocol, it's so frustrating. Like questionable is always frustrating for fantasy managers, but concussion protocol is doubly frustrating because that could be a guy could be ready the next day, or the guy could be out for the next 2 weeks. Like it's such a weird, and everyone's head is different, and everyone's obviously rightfully so concerned about head injuries. So
you
got to monitor that closely. And for sure, go to the waiver wire or queue up your second tight end because you need to have one just in case, obviously. So.
All right, that is what we have for news today. Let's get into panic or patience. Start at the top. Guy we just talked about in CJ Stroud, quarterback 17 through the first 3 weeks, has not hit 20 fantasy points yet this season and already had 2 games under 15.
Mm-hmm.
He was drafted as quarterback 5 in the 5th round. Josh, are you ready to panic on this guy, or are we being patient?
I love CJ Stroud, so I'm going to be patient. I think that, I was talking to our guy Simon, trying to explain to people how the Vikings destroyed the Texans 34-7, because while I was proud of the Vikings, I think they earned that win. I don't think we're 34-7 better than the Texans. I think the Texans are still a good team. They had an obscene amount of offensive penalties, illegal shifts, illegal formations on Laramie Tunsil, false start penalties. Like it was their offense was in shambles. And so I think they're going to tighten it up and rebound, especially against the Jaguars, who can't stop anybody in the air right now. So I'm going to be patient. I think that Stroud is too good to be in this low of a funk. I don't think he's going to be perfect. I think he's going to have some growing pains, not like a sophomore slump per se, but I don't think he's going to be amazing every game. I think he set a really high bar last year, so I think you have to watch that. But I'm going to be patient with him. I think he's too good to be held down for any period of time. And I like this week with the Jags as a get right game mentally and physically for the Texans offense. So I'm patient.
I am also going patient, but I do think you're going to have to pick and choose your spots, right?
Mm-hmm.
This week against the Jags, all in, it's easy start. I almost made it the start of the week, not because I guess because people could be thinking about it. Like, man, he's been bad. Do I actually start him? Like, yes, start him against the Jaguars. Start everybody
Right.
against the Jaguars, right?
Right.
And so, but moving forward, I do think you got to pick those spots. You got the Bills in week 5. If I've got other options, I'm probably going to look elsewhere that week. So
Yep.
it could also be a guy that maybe you just kind of stream along and you start looking 2 weeks ahead. You know you're going to start CJ Stroud this week. Maybe I go ahead and look at matchups for next week. Who can I throw at the end of my bench for quarterback that I won't need to use a waiver wire or fab on? I put him on the end of my bench now, so I know I'm going to start him next week instead of CJ Stroud against the Bills. So you could be doing something like that with CJ Stroud because when he has big games, he's going to have big games.
Right.
And they're not going to hold him under 20 for forever. So I am also going to be patient there with CJ Stroud.
Perfect.
Running back Rachaad White, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, running back 33 through the first 3 weeks, less than 10 points over the past 2 games. But now Bucky Irving is in the mix, and Bucky Irving looks like he is here to stay. Josh, I'm panicked on Rachaad White. If I drafted him, I'm looking to find a different running back here. I do think that Bucky Irving is for real.
Yep.
All the coach speak seems to think that Bucky Irving is going to stick around for a while. Rachaad White hasn't really looked good over the past couple of years as he's gotten these opportunities. I was big on Rachaad White when he first came out. I thought he was going to be the next guy. I thought he was going to take over for Fournette, be this great running back. Last year, he got a ton of opportunities. He just wasn't super efficient.
Right.
And so, middling running back for fantasy. And now this year he's kind of just been bad because he's not getting as many opportunities because Bucky Irving's there. So I am full panic on Rachaad White and ready to kind of probably let him go, at least send him to the end of my bench.
Yeah, I'm not dropping Rachaad White yet or anything like that, but I'm definitely in panic mode on him as well. He's never been efficient. He's always been the volume guy, and he's always had enough volume. So like you're saying, he's not getting the volume. I heard an interesting stat this week listening to one of CBS Sports Fantasy Football Today. I'll give them credit. The stat was something I'm pretty sure it was in Bucky Irving's short career. He's had 2 runs of 40+ yards already, and Rachaad White has also had 2 runs of 40+ yards, but that's in like 400+ touches. Like
wow.
There's no big play upside. There's no there's no excitement in that regard. So you're literally just hoping he gets 20 to 25 touches a game, which isn't going to happen. There was an actual tweet by one of the Tampa Bay reporters this past week that Todd Bowles said, yeah, he's got to get more touches, in reference to Bucky Irving. Like they're out and out saying it. So I don't think we'll see the end of Rachaad White getting touches, obviously, but I picked up Bucky Irving in one of my deep keeper leagues, and I'm actually considering starting him this week because I like the upside there, and I think that he's going to take this backfield over. So I'm going to try to get ahead of it a little bit, which is a little bit of a risk, and I'll talk more about it later. But yeah, I'm full on panic with Rachaad White for sure.
All right, wide receivers. We kind of touched on the Miami Dolphins a little bit earlier. Yep. But we're just going to lump these 2 guys together. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver 43, 10.5 PPR points per game so far. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 22. But if you take away week 1, he's only been wide receiver 60 over the past 2 weeks.
Yep.
This doesn't feel great, Josh. Where are you at here?
No, I'm in panic mode for all the reasons we said earlier. This offense, when it has its moments, it might be okay, but it's going to be really sketchy. It feels like it's going to be really sketchy, really inconsistent. You look at their matchups. They have Tennessee this week on Monday night. That's a good defense. Then they go to Foxborough and play the Patriots. That's a good defense. Like with an inexperienced or a lackluster talent back there at quarterback, they have those 2 defenses plus a bye. So you're sitting at, even if you're 3-0, you can't really afford to let these guys cost you a week by not putting up any fantasy points. So, like we mentioned earlier, I'm probably still starting Tyreek Hill for the time being, just because the draft capital and the fact that if he's my number 1, he's probably still at least better than my wide receiver 3/flex running back that I'm not sure about how much volume they're going to have. So, I'm out on Waddle for sure. And Tyreek Hill is giving me pause, but I think I'm probably still starting him, but I don't feel good about it. I'm panicking.
Yeah. It's hard because Tyreek can take a slant to the house, right? He's got such great speed that it just takes one play, and now you're kicking yourself and regretting not starting him. This is not the last time I will talk about the Miami Dolphins wide receivers tonight. But for me, I'm full blown panic, and I'm looking to trade Tyreek Hill right now.
Yeah.
Right. You're only 3 games in. He's got the name. You've got the draft capital.
Yep.
Somebody in your league is going to be like, oh, what the hell? Tyreek Hill's available? Like, yeah, of course I'll trade for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
And you might be able to get 2 or 3 serviceable guys. You know, you're not going to be able to get Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Like, they're not going to trade you 1-for-1 for Tyreek Hill. But maybe you can get 2 or 3, you know, middling guys that can help fill out your roster while you essentially dump what is now almost like probably if you take away injury to the player themselves, like Christian McCaffrey has going on, he might be the worst draft pick in fantasy football right now. And it has nothing to do with him. It's just that his quarterback got injured, right?
Right.
And so maybe you can play that in and say you can't call it the worst because the quarterback got hurt. But man, this is really bad in Miami. Yeah. They look really bad. I don't think they have a serviceable quarterback who's going to be able to feed Tyreek. And I'm trying to trade Tyreek right now. And I was so high on Tyreek and Waddle this year. I don't think you'll be able to trade Waddle, but I would be looking to trade Tyreek Hill if possible right now.
Yeah, if you can get a couple of depth pieces that maybe you sacrificed because you had Tyreek Hill and you thought that he was going to overcompensate for you know, lesser guys at certain positions, if you can kind of balance out your roster, I'm all for trading him as well. Not sure what you're going to get for him, but yeah, like you said, there's probably some players out there that are going to say, "Oh, he's Tyreek Hill, he'll be fine." So if I can get him for a little bit cheaper than I would have been able to normally, let's do it. So definitely kicking the tires there for sure.
All right, if somebody offered you Brian Robinson Jr., running back 16, and somebody like Jaden Reed with Jordan Love coming back. Jaden Reed, if you remember, had 33 fantasy points in week 1 with Jordan Love as his quarterback.
Ooh.
So Jaden Reed and Brian Robinson for Tyreek Hill. Would you trade Tyreek for those 2 guys? Now you get a good running back and potentially a high upside wide receiver with Jordan Love coming back.
Yeah, it definitely feels more exciting than Tyreek Hill with Tim Boyle. That's for sure. I would definitely think long and hard about it. I think that the deciding factor for me would be what my running back situation's like in that context. Like if Brian Robinson Jr. is a flex, like right, but also a running back too, because I have some other good running backs, then I might do that to add the depth, but also I don't know. It feels weird to talk about Tyreek Hill in this context. That feels like a weird trade for Tyreek Hill. It's hard to wrap my head around it.
Well, and I think like in that very specific instance that I just whipped up by looking at like just the standings from the week, Jaden Reed is not the star power yet, but he has a phenomenal high upside, I think.
Yeah.
But he's not the star power yet. And Brian Robinson is just another running back, right? Like he's going to end up between 12 and 24, and he's just going to be another running back. So neither one of those guys are the eye-popping guys. But on your fantasy team, they're both going to bring you 10 to 15 points every single week. So now you're adding 30 points to your squad each week potentially. That's why you got to look at it. That would be what I would be looking for. Maybe not those 2 players specifically, but 2 to 3 players that I could, at least 2 players I can start, and maybe a third player that I just like a Dontavian Wicks, who he's not really startable right now, but I think he might have an opportunity. He's gaining more snaps every single week.
Right.
Throw him in as like a throw in, right? Somebody like that might get there one day.
Right. And
that might intrigue me a little bit to move Tyreek for something like that.
Right. That makes sense, because Tyreek right now, the biggest issue is that uncertainty, and he's capable, but you're not sure if he's going to get the opportunity. Whereas a Brian Robinson Jr. has a really sturdy floor right now, where he's going to get a good volume, and you could be a little bit more consistent in that regard. Plus, you have the boom candidate with Jaden Reed. So
So if you have Tyreek, I mean, you have decisions to make, right? And good luck with those decisions. Obviously, dynasty leagues, this is null and void. You're not moving him there. But
No.
if you're in redraft, you drafted Tyreek in the top 3 of the draft probably, and you're feeling really bad right now. And my advice is to go out and try to make that trade, see what you can get for him, and start winning ball games.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to tight end. My guy didn't want to wear his jersey tonight because we were going to talk about him in such a bad light. Travis Kelce, the 32-year-old superstar who partied all summer long and is overweight and slow and sucks now and is what, tight end like
22.
I was going to say 24, but I couldn't remember what 22. Tight end 22. He had his best game of the year this week with 7 PPR fantasy points. I'll start here, and I'm going to go with patience. Not just because I'm, Chiefs fans, not just because I love Travis Kelce, but I'm going to be patient because I think what's going on right now, 2 things are happening with this Kansas City offense. One, they're not playing well. Yeah, they're 3-0. It's really, really hard to critique somebody. I'm getting my hair cut today, and the barber's like, how do you think the Chiefs are being? I'm like, 3-0 is good. But, you always have that, like, the offense has not looked great. Mahomes has not looked great. Mahomes has missed a lot of throws. It's actually a little frustrating to be watching over the first 3 weeks.
Yep.
And I think a couple things happen. I think that they start to get Kelce involved a little bit more. But I also think that the second thing, the biggest thing is the teams that they played. The Falcons, not so much. But the Bengals and Ravens have seen this Chiefs team so many times over the last 6 or 7 years. They know how to defend Travis Kelce. They don't know how to defend Rashee Rice because he's new. Like he's like a new toy for Mahomes, right? They haven't used him. They haven't faced him as much. And so I think that the defenses were just keying on him. And I do think as we get into the season and they're not seeing the same teams over and over again. This week's against the Los Angeles Chargers. If history repeats itself, Travis Kelce should smash. He's always smashed against the Chargers. Don't really understand what it is. I think they always just try to put a linebacker man on man with him, and he just beats him over and over and over again. So obviously new regime in LA this year. We'll see how they play it. But I think that's probably the biggest thing is like it's a little twofold. The offense doesn't look great right now. Mahomes is struggling. That sounds stupid to say. I understand that. But like truly, they're not hitting their expected points week after week. And the teams they played know how to take Travis Kelce out of the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. That might be a good litmus test this week when they go up against the Chargers. Every time I've watched the Chiefs and Chargers in prime time, Travis Kelce has gone off and had a monster game. So I'm actually in panic mode here, but it's just from a fantasy standpoint. I think he's still going to be a contributor to their deep playoff run. From an outsider's perspective, though, I just see this Chiefs team last year, one of the best defenses. This year, their defense is still really good. Like I feel like you guys are just planning for the Super Bowl all the time. So you just win how you need to win each game, week in, week out. You don't care about our fantasy numbers. And only 12 targets in 3 games for Travis Kelce scares me from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah.
But so I'm a little bit more in panic mode here than you are. But the point about the teams that they've gone up against is, I think that's relevant because those are just regurgitated playoff matchups from the past few years, right? So these teams have schemed against each other so much that does make sense. So maybe Kelce breaks out again this week against the Chargers, like for old time's sake, and we can all relax, and it can be that tight end one. So, and honestly, the tight end position is really crappy. So, I mean, if you drafted Kelce, you're still starting him, and you're just hoping for a turnaround at some point because he's still capable. I'm not panicked for his ability as a player in the NFL. I'm just from a fantasy standpoint, I'm worried he's just not going to be. They're going to. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the coaches think there, of course, but they're just going to win and keep winning, and they don't care if Kelce does it or doesn't.
Yeah. They're going to talk in the press conferences afterwards, like whatever, and they'll answer the questions, but they don't care. They they won the game, and that's what matters. That's what Kelsey said on his podcast this week. Like,
Right.
dude, we won the game. Whatever works. Like the stats don't matter. The championships do. So you're right about that. Doesn't really get much easier with the Saints and the 49ers after the Chargers this week.
Right.
But it starts to lighten up a little bit after that. So we'll see how they do. I'm starting to wonder if we're just going to keep seeing a lot of, 45-point totals for these Chiefs games, and they're just going to try to win by a field goal. And we're not going to have the 5,000 yards and 50 touchdown Patrick Mahomes that we once had and we loved.
Right.
All right, let's move on from panic or patience. Catch up with the chat here. Lee says he would make that trade in a nanosecond. So he liked the Brian Robinson, Jaden Reed for Tyreek Hill. Like that a lot. If you're here with us tonight, thank you for being here. Hit that like button and jump in the chat. Who are you panicking about? Or as we go on now to party or pass, who are you partying about? What players out there that you really have enjoyed seeing over the first 3 weeks that you want on your fantasy team that maybe we didn't expect to be great this football season? We'll start at the quarterback position. The coming out party for the quarterback 8 on fantasy football. Some call him the Red Rifle. We'll call him Andy Dalton. Wow. Quarterback 8, man. We got to party with this guy. He's older than we are. He is, slinging it around still.
Yeah.
This guy's ready to party, right? Like, what are we doing here with Andy Dalton?
Right. We're laughing, and I'm passing personally.
We're in disbelief. Laughing in disbelief.
Yeah, exactly. They go up against the Bengals this week, who are going to be desperate for a win. I think that was a little bit of a mirage from the Panthers. I think maybe the Raiders aren't quite as the Raiders are a weird team. They beat the Ravens and then they get throttled by the Panthers. It just doesn't seem to make sense. So who knows what's going on? But I mean, if he's back, that'll be exciting. What a great story for the NFL. Bryce Young notwithstanding, but I'm passing for now. I need to see it more. I need to see it against the Bengals, who are going to really get after him from a pass rush standpoint. And he's not mobile at all. So I'm worried about this upcoming matchup, but I mean, if he does well here, I might be tempted to go to a party. I might not ignore the invite, I guess, if if he does well against the Bengals, but maybe a revenge game, I guess. Who knows? Maybe he'll come
the
out
Bengals defense is bad. So getting the Raiders defense and the Bengals defense in the first 2 games is nice.
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, obviously a completely different quarterback and about 3 decades younger than Andy Dalton, but he absolutely torched the Bengals this week, right? So
right.
I am also passing on Andy Dalton himself. If you're in a pinch, like if you truly you don't know what to do at quarterback.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of somebody who maybe you're streaming quarterbacks and you picked up Derek Carr because you kind of liked what you saw the first couple weeks. Now you're like, crap, can I even play him? Like you could potentially stream Andy Dalton. You're in a 14-team league and you just stream quarterbacks every week.
Yep.
This week you could stream him against this Bengals defense. But I'm not buying into this. I'm not going to party with him. I am going to buy back into Deontay Johnson though. I do think that not a huge fan of Chuba Hubbard. He had a great game,
right.
But Jonathan Brooks is now practicing, I think I saw, and so he'll be back soon. So go check your waiver wires. If he's on the waiver wires, you should pick him up for sure. But I think Andy Dalton, if anything, I think he helps Deontay Johnson. And I think he's going to pepper Deontay Johnson with targets very similar to the volume he used to get in Pittsburgh. So I am buying back into that piece of it.
Yeah, it was, and we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the show here that it's great for Carolina's skill position players, especially Deontay Johnson. I'm a little bit hesitant still with Chuba Hubbard. I have him on one of my teams, and now I have that question of, okay, I benched him. He got almost 30 points. Now, do I put him in and see what happens? Because I still don't know if I buy Chuba Hubbard. But, yeah, Deontay for sure. He's going to get all those short passes. He's going to be great. Sam Darnold is party time for Coward.
Party time for Coward. I don't watch Colin, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, a lot of people are jumping on the Sam Darnold train for fantasy as well. So.
All right, let's go running back Alexander Madison for the Las Vegas Raiders. He is currently RB26. So he's not, this isn't a guy that is showing up, popping in the top 5, top 10. But I wanted to throw him on here because he's gotten you a consistent 12 points per game in the first 3 weeks. And for me, if you're desperate at RB2, I got a team that I came into the season as Rico Dowdle was my RB2. And he hasn't really shown up quite yet. I'm not ready to drop him, but I need to start somebody else. I think you could do worse than starting Alexander Madison.
Right.
You could be starting Zamir White still, right? And that would be worse than Alexander Madison. With all that said, I'm still going to pass on Madison. They both have their clear roles, Madison and White. Madison is the guy who is going to be in the game when Vegas is losing. And Zamir White's going to be in the game when Vegas is winning. Weeks 1 and 3, Vegas was trailing. Madison had 60 and 44% of the snaps. In week 2, when they were beating the Ravens, Zamir White had 60% of the snaps. So you easily see it's going to, flip-flop back and forth. It's very, very game dependent for both of these guys. And so I know they're going to lose a lot of games, but I'm just not ready to jump on board with Alexander Madison. I am happy that we mentioned him a little bit, especially for later on into the season. But the next 3 games against the Browns, Broncos, and Steelers, those are not teams that you really feel comfortable starting a running back by committee against.
Yeah, for sure. I'm passing as well. But the one caveat being, it is nice that a guy's role. And in the games where he's gotten a few targets, he's like in his games where he's got 3 catches and 4 catches. He had 3 catches in week 3, had 4 catches in week 1, and he was over that 12 fantasy points per game number because of the game script. He had a touchdown in each of those games, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. And so I think he's going to be touchdown dependent to an extent. And also he's going to need that game script to get on the field to get those passes. And those 3 defenses don't look enticing at all for him, but definitely keep him on your bench. He might be a guy, especially when bye weeks kick in, that you need to throw in at flex or RB2 if there's an injury. And you at least know you're going to get right around 10 fantasy points, which can help you still win a week. So he's definitely got value to stash, but I'm passing in terms of I'm not getting excited to start him, and I'm not starting him for a few weeks unless I absolutely have to.
We are on the same page there.
Yep.
Wide receiver Jawan Jennings, not
wide receiver 1,
Brandon Ayuk. Jawan Jennings. Wow, what a week he had. 3 touchdown catches. We talked about it a little bit at the top, like DFS, if you got him in your lineups and those kind of things. It worked out really well for you. So, is it time? Do we go ahead and start partying here?
I'm partying for sure until Debo and Kittle are back. When they get back, you're going to have to bench him, unfortunately, and maybe even once McCaffrey gets back, that cuts into it as well. But I mean, Jawan Jennings is interesting because he's always been that guy in key playoff games or big moments where he'll make a big catch. Like, he's never shied away from the moment. He just hasn't really had the opportunity, and he exploded. He had 3 touchdowns, 175 yards, insanity. So I'm definitely partying with him. He's been in San Francisco for a while now. He's definitely got the rapport built up, the chemistry. It's just about opportunity for him. So unless he gets, unless his target share percentage competition increases with a Debo or Kittle return, I'm going to party for a little while here. This may not be a party that goes, all through the night, but you might be home by, 10, 11 o'clock, but until then, it's going to be a great party. So
yeah, I agree with you here. I picked him up in a couple leagues in anticipation to start him. Mm-hmm. So that is, I think that he's going to have the role. I don't think he's going to have 3 touchdowns every week.
No,
I don't think he's better than Brandon Ayuk, but it's Brandon Ayuk and it's Jawan Jennings, and that's pretty much it right now for San Francisco, who's healthy. So I think you can go right back to him this week. You can start him this week. You can play him this week. Kittle and Debo will be out again. And like you said, until they come back, I think you just put him in your lineup. And
presumably, if you picked him up off waivers, because you probably didn't draft him, he's going in at your flex or your wide receiver 3. And so that's an elite, but potentially elite production for you at that spot. So that could be a week winner for sure again. So he's definitely worth it for a couple weeks here still.
Absolutely. Wide receiver 1 in week 3. Pretty awesome.
Oh,
Let's go to tight end 2.
Lee says you sniped him, Trev.
I must have been in a different league. I don't know what league it was in because I thought it was an ADP league, but actually Tyler picked him up a couple weeks ago in ADP. So
yep.
I'm sure I picked him up in one of my – I know I picked him up in a couple leagues. So love that for me.
Yep.
Cole Kmet, tight end 2. 10 catches on 11 targets. What do you think, Josh? You feel good about Cole Kmet?
I don't, but I might still be partying with him, if that makes sense. He exploded for 10 catches on 11 targets with Keenan Allen out. Caleb Williams threw for 360 some yards, if I'm not mistaken.
Crazy.
And they got the Rams this week, and so we talked about at the beginning that the Rams can't really guard anybody. So I'm thinking he might be able to get it at a floor of like 5 catches, hopefully between 50 and 80 yards. And then if he gets in the end zone, then you're super satisfied. Normally, I would say I need to see more from him before I start partying with Cole Kmet because I've been low on him all year. He did not start the year well. He just exploded, so there's not a lot of indication that it's a trend that's going to continue. But because the tight end position is so meh and so so middling, if I'm looking at my options and I see Cole Kmet with Caleb Williams put up some yards last week, he had a big week. They're going up against the Rams. I might give him a shot. So I put party, but it's a very tentative party. It's more of a because there isn't that much out there. So if I'm looking at streaming options and I like one more, I'm not feeling bad about benching Kmet, or I'm maybe not picking up Kmet, but if I have him and I don't like the matchup for some of my other guys or some of the streamers, I might run with him. So I'm kind of in party mode a little bit, but it's a very cautious party. I don't know. That's not a thing. You shouldn't go to a cautious party. That's boring.
It's like the after church party. You actually see lunch.
Yeah, for coffee and cookies. Yeah, that's the party.
That's right.
That's the party it is.
You can call it a party. It's a gathering, more or less.
Right.
Man, this one's so hard because you're right about the Rams, and then they got the Panthers the week after.
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be like a little 3-game sweep here. Just keep them in your lineup and start them if you don't have anybody better. I am still going to pass for now. I do think Keenan Allen will be back over the next couple weeks. I think that's going to really hinder the target share for Cole Kmet. And while he had a great game, there's still like this stigma of like why wasn't he starting over Gerald Everett at the beginning of the year? Like what was going on with that? Why has Cole Kmet been buried in this depth chart?
Right.
And now all of a sudden week 3 he's out here having 11 targets and getting 10 catches. So I'm a little bit leery of that just with Chicago in general.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, two good matchups coming up with the Rams and the Panthers. And I know Lee had asked earlier about Caleb Williams against the Rams. And, if he throws 300 yards again, you're going to feel pretty good about Caleb Williams. You're going to feel pretty good about Rome Odunze and probably feel pretty good about Cole Kmet at that moment. So I'm going to pass, but I think you make pretty good points there. And, it's hard to argue with him as a streaming tight end.
Right.
All right, that was our party or pass segment. Starts and sits for week 4 is coming up. This is an excellent opportunity for you all to jump into the chat and just let us know what start sit questions you've got that you're mulling over going into week 4. I was texting with my sister before, actually during the show just a little bit ago. She's asking about Rashid Shaheed. What's going on? Why'd he put up a donut, a 0 spot for me? And so everybody is going through it right now. Everybody is looking at their teams, trying to prepare as Thursday night football comes around tomorrow night. So if that's you and you're in the chat here, throw those questions in the comments. We will happily answer and give our takes.
Mm-hmm.
But first, let's get into quarterbacks, starts, and sits of the week. And I have the pleasure of kicking us off. I'm going back to the well the well of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield. This one's going to be a little bit difficult to do, right? You have 2 great games. Then he puts up a dud. Now he faces the Eagles, who the other guy who's had 2 great games and then has a dud in Derek Carr has against the Eagles. But Baker Mayfield, while he's not throwing the ball far down the field, he has great rapport with Chris Godwin, who has looked excellent this year. Mike Evans is still going to be there. They're going to throw the ball early and often in this game, I believe. I don't really think the Bucs will be able to I don't think they'll be able to stop Barkley. Now there's nobody else on the Eagles side, so maybe the Eagles don't push him as much as I kind of expect the Eagles to do with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown still out. But I do think the Eagles can push him a little bit, which is going to force Baker to throw a little bit here. And I could see him easily getting back into your top 12 quarterbacks for week 4. If obviously there's a lot of guys you're not starting Baker Mayfield over, right. But if you need a streaming option, if that's where you're at quarterback, you can start Baker Mayfield. And then my sit of the week is Jordan Love. If he plays, I think it's going to be, I drafted Jordan Love. I've been sitting on him, waiting on him to get back. He had a great week 1. Mm-hmm. I want to put him back in my line. Like, I think that's what fantasy managers are going to go through this week. Yep. They're going to get that he's going to be activated if he is activated. And they're going to think, wow, he had a great week 1. I got to put him back in there. But I'm here to just provide some context that, Josh, your Minnesota Vikings are freaking legit. That defense is good. Like, and Jordan Love's great. Matt LaFleur is a great coach. I just don't want to put him back in my starting lineup the first week back when it's against a defense such as the Minnesota Vikings. That's my only rub here. After this week, Jordan Love's probably a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback for fantasy the rest of the year. But I'm not ready to, I'm not auto starting him just because he's healthy, strictly because it's against the Minnesota Vikings. And, he could still be a little slow on that leg. Uh-oh. Did I lose you? Well, I may have lost Josh. So, 2 weeks ago, the internet issue was in Kansas. And I just, said, no, we're not having internet issues in Kansas anymore. You send those issues to Minnesota. You send them up north to the tundra, to the cold. Nah, hopefully he'll get back here. I'll pull up Discord and see what's going on with him. I assume he just lost internet connection, as I did just the other day. I'll go ahead and keep with my starts and sits. I'll hit my running backs here. My running back start of the week this week, Devin Singletary against the Dallas Cowboys, y'all. This Dallas Cowboys team, holy smokes, are they the worst defense in the league? Like, the running backs have just been absolutely destroying them. Last week, Derrick Henry goes off on him. I was going to look up what do you think they're giving up rushing defense-wise? Rushing yards per game. The Dallas Cowboys are dead last, 185 rushing yards per game. Dead last in the NFL for rushing. So I'm gonna start Devin Singletary against them, and who's been okay, has been good. So I don't mind that. And then my sit here is a pretty obvious one. I'm sitting Javonte Williams. I think this whole Denver this whole Denver backfield is too muddy, too murky. Don't really know what's going on there. And they're facing the New York Jets. Like, the New York Jets have a really good front. They've always had a really good front. You drafted Javonte. You might still believe in Javonte. I'm here. I think it's time to stop believing in Javonte and maybe start thinking about Jaleel McLaughlin a little bit more. I'm not starting him, but I'm definitely sitting Javonte Williams this week. Josh, welcome back. I was just given, had to tell everybody that I sent the internet issues up north to Minnesota.
I'm
We
just
don't
gonna
want him
say it was
down
the
here
KC,
anymore.
it was the Kansas City internet issues. It wasn't me. I don't
That's
know what
right.
happened.
That's right. So why don't you give us your quarterback start and sit of the week?
Yeah. So this one's very near and dear to me. It's one of my leagues I care the most about. I'm starting Justin Fields and I'm sitting Anthony Richardson, and it's a sad decision for me to make. When I started this season, Anthony Richardson was going to be my QB1 all year. Justin Fields was not even sure I was going to get him to start because Russell Wilson was the starter in Pittsburgh and he was trying to resurrect his career. But they play each other. The Steelers get the Colts, and Anthony Richardson really has been struggling. His completions percentage is barely above 50%, and he just doesn't have he doesn't quite have the rushing upside or rushing floor that we thought he was going to have, and so he's still getting some big chunk plays. But until he starts to get more consistent on the ground or higher completion percentage, which I think could happen with Josh Downs, I have to sit him on the bench for now. He needs to develop another week. So I'm taking Justin Fields, who threw for 245 yards last week. So he got his arm going a little bit. It's tough because the Steelers' offense isn't exactly exciting either. But that's the reality in one of my leagues that I have because I was so high on Anthony Richardson. So starting Justin Fields, sitting Anthony Richardson. Especially because Pittsburgh has only given up more than 10 points to opposing quarterbacks once. That was to Justin Herbert, who got 11. So Anthony Richardson, it doesn't look good on paper for him to get more than 10. And I need more than 10 for my quarterback, as we all do. So
yeah, amazing how quickly things change.
yes.
Week 1, Anthony Richardson goes for 27 points and Justin Fields goes for 12.
Right.
And Justin Fields has actually only gone for, 11-9, 11-4, but then last week 19-4. So
right.
They're both trending in completely opposite directions.
Yep.
So
exactly.
Ride the hot hand.
That's right. You want me to do my running backs? You already did your running back.
Right? Go ahead and do running backs.
Nice. I'm actually going back to the Bucks here, and I kind of alluded to it, or we foreshadowed at the beginning. I think we were talking about this. I'm all in on Bucky Irving right now. I'm going to try to get ahead of the curve. So I'm starting Bucky Irving. I just think that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I mean, he only had 9 carries, but he had 70 yards last week. So I think if he can get in the end zone and have a couple of chunk plays, I think he represents a good floor. I'm not going to tell anyone else to start him though, because my running back last week was DeAndre Swift. So this is also kind of going out on a limb because I'm looking at, this would be your flex probably. I'm not saying he should be your RB2 or RB1 or anything yet, but if I feel good about the stability of the rest of my positions, I'm going Bucky Irvin in the flex and hope that he has kind of a breakout game and gets like 25 fantasy points. So it's a pretty aggressive play. So while I'm saying he's my start, I would also say, take that advice with caution. For my sit, this is an interesting one too. He's coming off a huge game. Zach Charbonnet had 2 touchdowns and over 90 yards rushing last week. Kenneth Walker is still questionable. I'm not sure if he's going to be back this week. But either way, the Seattle backfield goes up against Detroit. And last week, one of my sits was James Conner, who's coming off a big game, and he did absolutely nothing against Detroit's rush defense. And so that's slowly kind of turning into one of those matchups that, you don't really want any piece of, which is tough because Seattle's good at running the ball. And so if you think that Seattle is good enough to run against anybody, I'd say go for it. And it's hard to not start, Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet because of the volume that they both get when they're the lead back. But, in a world where Kenneth Walker's back and Charbonnet's still there, I might just avoid the Seattle backfield altogether. So there as my sit, just because James Conner, he was RB 53, had 9 carries, 17 yards, and 1 catch. Like he did absolutely nothing. It wasn't that he had a down week; he had just a non-existent week. And so, that's kind of where I was going with the Bucky Irving thing too. If I think those guys are going to be more towards the flex side of things for Seattle, then I'm just going to go sheer upside. I'm going to avoid that tough matchup, and I'm going to, make the aggressive play there. So.
Yeah, I like the Bucky Irving play more than I like the DeAndre Swift play. Right, like I came in, I was like, clear, I am not on this Swift play. But Bucky Irving play, I'm like, you know what? I could see there could be the right rosters could be having to play him. There. So, and yeah, I agree with you with Detroit. You want to just play the passing game against Detroit,
Right.
like that has been what's hitting week over week against this Detroit defense.
Right.
Charbonnet hasn't been super efficient either. He's been great for fantasy, keeps scoring, those kind of things, but he hasn't been super efficient and hasn't really played a tough defense yet. So, like both of those. Let's go on to running back. Before I give my running back start of the week, not much time left in the podcast tonight. So if you do have those burning start sit questions, last week we had a couple trade questions that came in. That was fun to talk through. Get those in the chats now. We will definitely touch on each and every one of them as we end the show here tonight. So get those in the chat now. Let us know your start sit questions. If you got some looking for trade advice, anything that has to do with fantasy football, we will answer the question for you. My start of the week for wide receiver is Tank Dell versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mentioned earlier we'd be talking a little bit more about Houston. Again, I think this is just a really, really, really good get right spot, right? Josh Allen just absolutely shredded this defense on Monday Night Football, throws 4 touchdowns to 4 different guys. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think this is a really good spot for CJ Stroud, and I think this is a really good spot for Tank Dell to get back involved in this offense. Steph Diggs has kind of overcome that for, instead of Tank Dell, and I think that we all kind of expected that a little bit. But Tank Dell and CJ Stroud are the best friends. Like, what happened to the best friends narrative? Feed your friend the ball a little bit here, and I think that this is a really good opportunity for Tank Dell to get back into the offense and this offense as a whole, to get back into the swing of things, especially I almost said Zach Moss, but he's in the Bengals now. No Joe Mixon,
right?
If he's not in there, so Cam Akers wasn't great. The running game wasn't awesome, so I do think they'll probably throw the ball a little bit more here, giving Tank Dell kind of a boomer bust opportunity. And then my sit of the week. You said earlier it would be difficult to do this. I will be doing this should I have options.
Sure.
That is sitting Jalen Waddle, easy sit, and Tyreek Hill against Tennessee defense. Tennessee top 3 pass defense through the first 3 weeks. Very good defense. That's how they want to win ball games, is through this defense. Tyreek Hill, I get it. It's going to be very, very difficult. And as soon as you do it, he's going to take a 60-yard slant to the house. I understand that.
For sure.
It's going to happen. But I think 80% of the time this week, you're going to feel really good about sitting Tyreek Hill on Monday or on Sunday night. You're not going to feel good on Sunday morning doing it.
No.
But come Sunday night, when you look at your fantasy team, you see Tyreek Hill on your bench with 5.5 PPR points, and insert, Tank Dell,
right?
He gets 15 fantasy. I don't know, 15 fantasy points. You're going to feel really good about that decision. It's going to be difficult, but that's what I'm doing. I'm putting the stamp down. I'm sitting Tyreek Hill. And remember, I've been burned twice already with my sits of the week. So maybe this is a good omen for Tyreek Hill.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I think for fantasy across the world, we're probably hoping that you're wrong about that.
That's
because
right.
we don't want him to be affected by this quarterback play, but it's hard to ignore. And you're gonna feel crappy when you bench him, but you're gonna be so uneasy monitoring that Dolphins game when when Tennessee's holding him down a little bit, and he's got, like you said, 5.5 points, and it's in the fourth quarter, and you're like, I'm not getting my fantasy points for my wide receiver 1. I especially like your Tank Dell pick. He's been, he's just missed on some big plays, and he is a little boomer bust right now, but he gets enough volume where if he gets one of those big chunk plays, like you're looking at 10 PPR points pretty consistently. And I think this is a get right game against the Jags for sure. So for my wide receiver, my start is actually kind of a sleeper for flex play. I have Michael Wilson. We kind of talked about this at the beginning of the show as well, with Trey McBride in concussion protocol. Michael Wilson has always been reliable for the Cardinals offense. Greg Dortch is also battling a little bit of a hamstring issue. I think he's going to play, but he might not be 100%. Marvin Harrison is the clear top target getter. Sorry. But Michael Wilson is just really solid, and he had a good amount of targets last week, and so I'm feeling pretty good about him as a flex with some upside, or a wide receiver 3 in 3 wide receiver leagues. And the Cardinals go up against the Commanders, and we've talked about them at length tonight as well. The Commanders give up a lot of passing yards, so it's not unlikely that Dortch, if McBride doesn't play, if Harrison, Dortch, and Michael Wilson all have decent amount of catches and yards. So I'm feeling pretty good about Michael Wilson as a start. But again, as a sleeper, we're not talking about wide receivers 1 and 2 here. We're talking about kind of filling out that roster at the end. And then my sit, it feels easy, but it also feels weird. I feel like we don't talk about these guys a lot, but I'm sitting Jacoby Myers, and I don't know. I'd be curious to see what his start percentage was, but he had 7 catches on 9 targets. His counterpart, Trey Tucker, also did for the Raiders. And this offense does not excite me at all. We talked about it with Alexander Madison and Zamir White. And they're going up against the Browns this week. And so the Browns secondary, they've been a little bit more susceptible than they were last year against the pass, but I'm not trusting Jacoby Myers there. I feel a little bit better about Devontae Adams perhaps, but it's just I don't want too many pieces of this offense in Las Vegas. And so I'm sitting Jacoby Myers, even if you're someone that's had him on your bench and you see that 7 catches on 9 targets and you're like, this might be the time I give him some run. I'm avoiding him. I'm sitting Jacoby Myers.
I was just looking it up. About 15% on sleeper and sub 10% starting on ESPN.
Oh, okay.
For week 4. I don't really know how quickly those update, or if they're like the week before week, or like what it's currently in the starting lineup. So, but a lot of people don't really set their lineups right now, right? They're going to set their lineup here over the next couple of days. And how easy is it to click on the name and see the box score? Oh, he did that last week. All right. Yeah.
Right.
I'm down for that. And so I think it's just a sharp point to be like, hey, you're going to see a nice box score. Don't buy into it.
Don't be tempted.
Don't buy into it. All right, our last one is our tight ends. The one that I absolutely botched last week with my sit of the week. So appreciate you all being here in the chat. I know I said it like 2 or 3 times already, but this is actually your last opportunity, as this is our last position to go through. Josh, why don't you get us started here? Who is your start and sit tight ends?
I was patient on Dalton Kincaid. I think you were as well last week, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's getting rolling. He got a touchdown last week. The Bills have the Ravens, but the Ravens have actually given up the 2nd most yards to tight ends. I just think it's only a matter of time before Kincaid starts putting up some big numbers for us. So I'm starting Kincaid with confidence, even though he's been a little bit lackluster considering where you drafted him or where you had him ranked at the beginning of the year, most likely. Ferguson had a pretty big week last week against the Ravens as well for Dallas. And so they're giving up some stuff to tight ends. Josh Allen has been slinging it. So the Ravens defense is a little bit down from what they were last year. So I think it might be a relatively high scoring game. And I think that Kincaid will get his. I'm sitting Brenton Strange. Evan Ingram's probably not back this week. And the Jags, again, we've kind of really harped on the Jags a lot tonight, I guess, but they're kind of in.
Well, they're bad.
Yeah, they're in early season free fall mode, and I almost, I'm trying to think of again not being fooled, right? Like Brenton Strange was, top 10 tight end. Tight ends are a weird position. Like you might be like, wow, there's a lot worse I could do if I'm streaming. I'm not buying into that yet. I need to see the Jags do something productive, something exciting, and they're just not doing any of that right now. So I'm avoiding. I'm avoiding the Jags because they have we've talked about that. They have the Texans this week. And I think that this is a very, very likely, in my opinion, this is a very likely scenario where the Jags leave the Texans game at 0-4 and not feeling good and heading towards the 1st overall pick. So,
and Doug Peterson's getting fired, right? I mean, I don't know if that's really true, but that's what I would expect to happen.
Right.
Should they lose again? Yeah,
something's not clicking in Jacksonville, and they committed to Trevor Lawrence. So if it's not working with Doug Peterson, they're gonna have to move on and try something else. So
they got all the weapons with ETN and Brian Thomas Jr. there now. They've brought in guys over the past couple of years, with Calvin Ridley last year, and then Gabe Davis, and like they're trying to bring people there.
right.
It just ain't working.
Yep.
All right, my tight end start/stream of the week is Zach Ertz against the Arizona Cardinals. Zach Ertz for the Washington Commanders, currently the 9th overall tight end in PPR scoring. He has a 17% target share through the first 3 games, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not elite levels, but for a tight end,
Tight end's pretty good.
on the Washington Commanders, like you're really going to like 17%. And this is by far the best offensive environment of the week. If you look at all the games across the board, if this game, holds true to the 50.5 point total, I think Zach Ertz is going to, give you an opportunity. Maybe he ends with 4 catches and 40 yards and falls into the end zone one time. I think there's worse tight ends out there than going ahead and stream Zach Ertz this week. And,
For sure.
If that happens, maybe he falls top 8, top 5, potentially, just strictly because the tight end position is actually really bad. So 4 catches could do a lot for you at the tight end position.
Right. Seriously.
And then my sit of the week, another star, another big name. We kind of went opposites this week with I went stars and you went guys who have had big weeks that you don't want to be fooled by. I'm going Mark Andrews against Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
He's only had 8 targets the entire season through 3 games.
That's crazy.
He's not even averaging 3 targets a game yet. That feels weird and feels odd.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's talking about Travis Kelce, and nobody's really talking a lot about Mark Andrews. We all talked about it after the first game, and the Chiefs have doubled him, right? They got a linebacker in front of him, the safety over the top. Don't panic on Mark Andrews. The Chiefs are doubling him. He never has good games against the Chiefs. I came on this show and said that myself.
Mm-hmm.
Gave a bunch of stats of what he does against the Chiefs. Now here we are 2 more weeks later, and he still is not doing anything at all, just 8 targets, and now going against the stingy Buffalo Bills defense, which, dude, Buffalo, fantasy aside, Buffalo looks really, really good right now.
Yeah, they do.
I wrote them off. I did not expect them to be good this year.
Mm-hmm.
And, wow, they look very good right now. That defense is very good.
Yep.
And I think that, this is an interesting ball game just for NFL implications. Baltimore went to Dallas and could have been 0-3. They ended up winning that game to go 1-2. And now you play a 3-0 Bills team that you could end up 1-3 now. Like that's that would be rough for the Baltimore Ravens. That schedule not getting any easier for them.
Yeah.
Big game for them.
Yep. And I'll jinx Josh Allen right now because he has 0 interceptions on the year. Like, you talk about the Bills playing well.
Wow.
He hasn't had any of his mental lapses yet where they're just rolling people and he's putting up numbers, and he's got 7 TDs, 0 picks. Like, the Bills look very formidable, so to say the least.
And he loves throwing interceptions. So
That's right.
That's great. That is great. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. Hopefully you're 3-0 in your leagues. And if not, let's get back on the right track this week for week 4. Josh, tell the people where they can find you as we close out here.
Yeah, definitely keep hopping on to Bite Size Sports for our show every Wednesday, Necessary Roughness every Tuesday, and everything in between with the Star Wars stuff. I do my Mike on the Vikes, been pretty consistent 3 weeks in a row. So if you are looking for a new team, the Vikings are 3-0. This is time to jump on the bandwagon. It's still early enough where you can be a real fan when we're making a deep playoff run. So hop on board. They're really quick.
Arnold train.
That's right. I just react to the game and talk about things I like and dislike just because, we geek out about our football teams, and I like to do that too. So hit me up on X at JLime8. We can talk Vikings. We can talk NFL, and we can just enjoy this beautiful season of the year.
Yeah, crazy that we're already 3 weeks
It's
through.
wild.
Next week when we talk, we're going to be a quarter of the way through the fantasy season, right?
Yep.
That's pretty crazy there. Tomorrow night, right here on Bite Size Sports, we got a double header. Supersize Sports will go, and then John was sick last night, so Necessary Roughness will now be tomorrow night. So pull your computer up, put Bite Size Sports on the computer, put the NFL game on your TV, and have yourself a nice Thursday evening. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Please like the video. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it so much. Follow me on Twitter at TrevorS_FF. Follow the podcast at ADP Podcast_FF. Until we see you next week, may all the winning be in your favor. See you later.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.